what do you think? What do you think about the new intro?
I love the new intro, buddy, and I can't believe I chose such a crappy background to deal with that new intro. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like let's just go this one. Let's just go this one. There we go.
I like
there we
that.
go.
I
Now
like
we're
that
good.
one.
Now we're good.
Now we're good. So
good.
we just want to welcome everybody to Sales Chatter, the logistics podcast where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohamed, the logistics monk. With me is my good friend, the amazing man, Dan Deigan himself. What is going on this morning, brother? What did you eat for dinner last night?
All the time, eh? I actually had pork last night for dinner, and it did not go down. I literally almost choked myself out at the dinner table. It was pretty bad. Pretty bad, because now you see what's happening now is I'm loving food. I'm on day 14 was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so day 17 of eating orally, and I'm already lost until it's a new food I haven't tried. I've already lost that whole, oh my God, this food is like that experience that I had at the beginning. So we had pork loin, and I was like diving into it, and I didn't chew it very well. And I'm like, and my daughter's like, okay, just breathe, Dad, just breathe. And she was coming around to give me like the Heimlich, and I finally choked it up. And like, it's not a pretty sight at the dinner table, brother. So I got to go back to just my small pieces and enjoying my meal one bite at a time.
Man.
But
Eat small, be happy.
Yeah.
And that's all what it is, man. So you know what? Let's get into that today, because we're not aiming small here. We're taking big steps here. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
We get like video after video on this bad boy.
Oh, we're kicking up a notch, where the presentation is going up. We're not just bringing the value, but we're bringing a good looking product to you.
I like
too,
that
right?
shirt.
Oh, the Elite, baby. This is a wrestling t-shirt. Shout out to Dean, who will definitely appreciate it. But the Elite AEW. So it is that a day, Dean. We have the amazing Dean Croke and the Bodacious Cowboy joining us to talk about amazing things that are going on. And like we've kind of said, Dan, the intention is how can we use this information to help either newer, seasoned, or like expert sales reps help with their customers. So let's bring on Dean Croke, who is he on the spaceship today? I do not know. There we go. What's going on?
He's on the road.
Oh, back home. I'm heading into the sunset.
There you go.
And then,
best place to be driving.
Best place to be driving. And we'd have the Bodacious Cowboy himself as well, Jeff Dickinson, joining us. And he's at home. So he's not at a spaceship or anything like that. What's going on this morning, gents?
Not much. Yeah. Quite a bit today. Got a lot going on today.
What do we got going on today, there, Diener?
I don't know. I'm always the eternal optimist. I just see lots of good things in the market happening. But then I talked to a good friend of mine this morning, and he said, "I'm up here in Gloucester," and I said, "What are you doing in Gloucester?" And he said, "I'm driving a paving truck," and I said, "Oh, you're not doing your long haul refrigerated truck anymore?" And he said, "Yeah, I should have got out of it a long time ago." So he was one of these guys that came into the market during the boom. Ran a reefer truck, car hauler for 9 years, got into the spot market, rode it all the way out, probably hung on a little bit too long, but paid off his $50,000 Freightliner and trailer, and got out of it really well. But he said it couldn't make a margin, chasing too many low-paying loads, too much time on shipper docks, couldn't get the miles per week. So it was like a typical scenario that's played out a lot, but he's happy. So I think that's the main thing, is he's home every night with his two teenage kids. But it's a familiar story that we're hearing across the market. Contract rates are still pretty high, so I think there's a bifurcation in the market that's probably worth talking about. But imports are surging again, back over 2 million for April. Again, no surprise there. So construction industry is booming, like construction spending is through the roof, while domestic residential sales are down. So I think it depends on what you're hauling and what you're selling and what sort of market you're in as to what your fortunes look like. For some, it's wonderful times. Others, it's not. But again, it's regional too, right? So it's not, I was thinking about our national rates. Like a national rate is, if you said, what's the average of 65,000 lanes across the entire country, it's almost like a meaningless number, because it's not what you're hauling the freight for. It's not what you're selling it at, because it's very regionalized and lane specific. But how else do you get a pulse of the industry? How else do you figure it out? And but the thing with this market is right now, there's still a lot of value in some markets. Like if you were selling capacity in Texas, for example, and it was flatbed, you'd be struggling. Like their rates are really, really solid and carriers are busy. If you were trying to buy capacity to ship water out of Maine this week, you'd be struggling too. For all the big water manufacturers up there, they're trying to position it all before summer. So I think it depends on the market. You've got to be pretty savvy. You've got to really understand the market and be mindful of the. I think I'm going to say all freight is local, but I don't know if that's the right. Maybe it's not local is the right word, but it's certainly not national. As I've said on the show before, no one's home at the average. It's on the outside of that where the margins are.
Yeah, I think you absolutely need to know your market. We were talking to Saritha yesterday, and I asked the question, how do you recession-proof your business?
Yeah.
Right. And you haul stuff that everybody uses all the time. I remember so many times the market went down, and I was huge into pharmaceuticals. My business never really went down.
Right.
Because of the product I was carrying. And unfortunately, your friend who was kind of chasing that spot market, he was chasing a rate from where he was going to going somewhere else. And it was never really that, call it niche, call it specific product, whatever it was. And I think that's where you get in a lot of trouble, especially in today's market, because again, you can go out for great money and then lose your shirt coming home and it wasn't worth going. But when you were on your way out, you were like, yeah, this is paying well. And then, load falls through or however it may work. And then now you're, pretty much paying to move somebody's freight. Well, it's not a good business model.
No.
We're still, DJ's in. G'day, DJ. Haven't seen Lisa jump in this morning. Haven't seen Lisa on the last few shows. So,
yeah.
Well, she's around. But, I was looking at our data yesterday in flatbed in particular, because it's a really good barometer for the industrial economy, the manufacturing side of our industry. And when you look at spot rates, they're sitting exactly in the middle of 2018 and 2019 rates. It's a really interesting chart because they started off looking like a 2018 year, which was a great year for flatbed carriers. And 2019, of course, was a horrible year for flatbed carriers and most carriers. But so you think, okay, why is that? Why are freight volumes and rates kind of in between those 2 years, which were polar opposite years? Well, I think part of my answer was it came down to things like the housing market boom has tanked. It's over. And spending is down about 12% in the last year when you look at the Census Bureau data. But as Jeff and I have talked about on the show, and I was in Fort Worth last week, Jeff, driving around and hanging around the BNSF ramp and watching all of the Amazon Prime planes come in and out of the Fort Worth airport.
Right.
And it was an illuminating couple of hours because the amount of infrastructure and warehouses that have been built and being built was absolutely breathtaking. I've not seen it on any scale like it is now. So so I came home and said, okay, so where can I find some data that talks about the amount of money being spent in non-residential commercial construction? And if you go to the FRED database, which is a free database, it's a little bit lagged, but it comes out monthly and it's really reliable and it shows the amount of money being spent on residential and non-residential construction. So when you pull the data, and you can download it in Excel really easily, it shows that commercial spending on non-residential products is at a record high in March, up 30% in the last year. Wow. So these are airport infrastructure, new schools, new university, new bridges, new warehouses.
Yep.
And so while residential homes, lumber, timber, roof shingles, plywood, plasterboard, all those things are down because new homes aren't being built and people have these sort of golden handcuffs around the homes they're in because of low interest rates. They can't sell them or don't want to. So you've got this, so anyone that was sort of exposed to the building industry as it related to housing, rode the crest of that wave up and the rates have come down and so have the single family home starts. But I kept hearing from carriers in the specialized flatbed market that they're seeing really good freight volumes in commercial. And the data proved it. The data proved it out. So I think it depends on where you are as to what your fortunes look like this year. But if you remember back when the pandemic started, we were talking about winners and losers. There were some commodities that were through the roof because we were all at home. Others fell through the floor. Well, this kind of looks like that a little bit now in some respects, not to the same degree. But if you think about if I'm a flatbed carrier, well, single-family housing volumes have fallen away. But the flip side is I'm being offset by construction volume. That's a little bit different equipment, and it's more project work, and you get a lot more time under cranes and a little bit more distance between loads. But that's what we're hearing right now is there's still good opportunities in the market. It's not all doom and gloom. There's still carriers leaving the industry, like my friend. I think there's still capacity is going to leave the industry. And as we said on the show last week, that will be the determinant for the next market cycle. It won't be a demand because even if one's up and one's down, they're still kind of flat, which is what most people are saying is the market will be kind of flat this year from a demand perspective.
And
yeah, something, I've been reading, and I also posted some stuff on G Captain. And, we were talking about this several months ago, Dean, about the shift, the shift from the West ports to the East Coast. And I read an article that basically said that the West Coast year over year has seen a shift of 1 million TEUs eastward.
Yep.
And to our credit, and to your credit, because you did the data analysis on it, Houston, I was up at 24%. I don't know what it is right now, but you can see the reasons why the infrastructure is booming as much as it has been, especially down 35. And then you see all that being shifted to Savannah and New York, New Jersey, which is the #1 port now. Who would ever think? And we kept on saying that. Big things are happening, and they're happening quickly. They don't see a rebound quickly for the West Coast ports. So that is going to have a huge impact on the capacity, where the freight is moving, what the lanes used to look like, especially when there was a huge boom out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's shifted. The capacity has shifted to the point where rates are starting to increase because there's less capacity on the West Coast. Because I think a lot of people have figured out that West Coast is a place you don't want to be if you've got a dry van or in fact any equipment type, because things were so bad there. But volumes are, this is a little bit hard to get a read on it, Jeff. Volumes are up 16% in the last month. So we're coming out of that post Chinese New Year slowdown, February, March, and then volumes start to come back up again. So all volumes across all ports are up. That's what I'm trying to say. But when you look at the year-over-year comps, and I'll quickly go to, they're all up. Year over year, they're all sort of up. But again, it's hard. We're coming off such record highs last year. Los Angeles up 20% in the last month. New York up 23%. Houston up 13%. The positions haven't changed much. Imports from China have surged. They're up 37% in the last month. Furniture's, back on the tear again. Literally, we're bringing in more furniture than we've ever brought in before. So it'll take a little while to get a read on whether this shift has been sustained. The murmurs of a ILWU agreement are sort of making the rounds. We're not sure, but I think that'll be too late for a lot of shippers that have already rerouted their discretionary volumes to the Gulf Coast. So yes, the Gulf Coast has been a booming market. Texas is just a great place to be if you've got equipment looking to make pretty good money. The data point that I did want to share with you on the imports, Ryan, if that was sort of the segue to today's show, was that when I look at the volumes going back to prior years, so I said, okay, if April volumes are up compared to what? And so I went back and pulled April data for the last 5 or 6 years to see where we sit today. Because April volume, we're back over 2 million containers. Now, you remember what we said, we were over 2 million TEU after the pandemic hit, and that's what really disrupted the supply chain. Whenever you get above 2 million for an extended period of time, we start to get into trouble. Well, we're back over 2 million again this month for the first time in like 3. But so I went back and pulled the containerized volume for the back to 2017, so 5 Aprils. This month we're 4% higher. So we're 4% higher than the average of the prior 5 Aprils, going back 5 years prior to this year. And it's only 86,000 20-foot containers, but it's still higher. And so that tells me that we've still got a pretty healthy import economy. Shippers wouldn't be bringing that volume in. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if they still had massive inventories.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it tells me that.
And not to mention, Dean, 86,000 containers in 1 month is a lot of containers.
Right.
That could put a real jam in capacity at certain ports, chassis at certain ports, the warehouses doing the cross-docking and redistribution or whatever the case may be, the de-stuffing and palletizing. I mean, 86,000 containers divided by 30 days that's a lot of freight.
Yep.
Give us 10% of that, brother. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So to Jeff's point, we're seeing a lot of, break bulk volumes are still pretty healthy on the Gulf Coast. Houston was ranked number 5 in total volume. Volumes are up 13% in the last month. Construction and building equipment is ranked pretty highly in Houston for containerized volumes. So still seeing pretty good volumes. The other thing that I did want to share about the Fort Worth market, and I've been seeing such a, one of the strongest freight markets for flatbed carriers has been Texas, like in terms of rates, like really, really good rates. In fact, the rates are, when I look at the rates over the last 5 or 6 years for week 18, a little bit higher than 2018 in Texas for outbound loads. Now, 2018 was a really good year nationally, but in particular in Texas. But I couldn't figure it out why. And part of it's got to do with the break bulk volume that Jeff alluded to that comes into Houston. So there's a lot of steel imports come in and lumber comes into Houston and then gets sort of trucked out of there, particularly to the Permian Basin oil field. But there's also the BNSF ramp. And I never really thought this through, but when I was sitting there in Fort Worth outside the BNSF ramp, watching all of the trains and trucks come in and out, it occurred to me that there was something else coming into that market that I hadn't thought about. And of course, BNSF bring a lot of lumber in from the Pacific Northwest into Fort Worth. They also bring in a lot of steel from regional steel mills plus imports. And a lot of that steel goes out to the Permian Basin oil field. So when I go in and look at my rates on the spot market and just outbound volumes from Fort Worth, I see a correlation between all of that. It's just a really healthy freight market. There's a lot of building activity. There's a lot of energy exploration going on still. And there's a lot of warehouses being built still, which is a lot of steel and prefab concrete and all of the machinery. One of the things that I'd never thought about again, I was with a colleague of mine at TAA, and they do a lot of what he calls logistics. Deep logistics was the term he used. And I said, what do you mean when it comes to warehouses? And he said, well, if you think about the machinery that's needed to build a warehouse, it's a rubber-tied dozer. Then it's a telehandler to move, to lift cranes up. And then it's a massive crane. And you have all these different types of equipment throughout the entire building process. So when we go in and talk to a customer, we get deep into the logistics of that, and we handle when and where the machines have got to be delivered based on the building of the warehouse. And I'd never thought it through, but there's a whole logistics function around supplying machinery to a warehouse at the various stages. So a lot of that's still going on in Texas in particular. But this is always the question, Jeff, what will we fill them with? And if you said, well, April imports look pretty good, maybe things aren't all that gloomy right now. So that's some good news. I'm pretty excited about April imports being up. I was worried they wouldn't be up as much, but remember, imports only account for about 10% of truckload volume. So it won't be what turns the market, even though we've got more volume. And as Dan says, more transloading and more drayage work. That won't be the only thing. We've got road check week next week. We've got Mother's Day carriers. A friend of mine sent me a picture of his load out of Miami this morning, and he's got 6 drops. So this is a little bit of a segue here to a subject that's not entirely related, but truckers hate flowers, right? Even though it's Mother's Day, they are a pain in the rear end because he's got it's floor load, live load, no pallets, and he's got 6 drops out of Miami. So let's just follow the map: Birmingham, Memphis, Omaha, Sioux Falls, and finally Minneapolis.
Oh my
God
He's
bless.
God.
Yeah, I was gonna say, God
Stick-
bless. He's making some money. He's making some coin on that one. You know,
But
he's
it's hand unload, live unload, and he's got 6 stops, and he's going to be under that load for 4 or 5 days. They hate it. So anyway, that's kind of a bit of a segue. There's opportunity all over the market if you want to do the hard work. But so Mother's Day won't be. Mother's Day is driving rates through the roof out of Miami. Yeah, flowers. This is, and again, it's something I'd never thought about. But I was talking to a carrier down the road the other day unloading flowers, and he said it's, what do you call it, horticulture season or something? It's flower season, and there's a lot of guys hauling stuff for nurseries. You see flatbeds hauling big palm trees.
Yep.
So it's sort of one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to talk. You want to talk that like becoming an adult. Yeah, he'll come back in. You want to talk about being an adult.
Yeah.
Figure out when you have to buy plants and flowers for your home and outdoor furniture. You know, you always think those things are cheap as a kid, but as they kind of come back, it's like, it's pretty crazy to kind of see. But it is so true, Dean, that you're kind of saying, because you look around you, like our nurseries opened maybe like 2-3 weeks ago, and you go to Costco, right? Everywhere has their garden center already. So it's like you start to think, if you're in the freight broker side of it, being a sales rep, you're like, okay, we're talking seasonality here. You should have really been having these discussions with your customers, and like maybe even last year, like November, December, of what you're going to be looking at for Q2 here.
So think about, we're talking about the things that might lift the market. There's clearly capacity still exiting the spot market. Rates are still pretty high in the contract spot market. And I had one of my colleagues, Donnie Gilbert, who I love dearly at FreightWaves, said he called the produce season a bust. I think you read that note, Jeff. You sent that note to me, and I thought, Donnie really knows the market. So I've been studying it pretty carefully. And last week there was something that changed that gave me pause. And I thought, I wonder if this is the turning point where produce season may come back. So I looked at the 5 main produce regions across the country, California, Florida, and then you've got Mexico, Texas, Mexico, Arizona, Mexico, California. They're your 5 main produce regions where we track volume. Across those 5 regions, so if I go back to the week prior, there were 5,000 fewer truckloads of produce compared to this time last year. Last week, only 680. So the week prior to last week, there were 5,000 fewer loads year over year. Last week, it was down to 689. So there's more
drought in California and stuff, and then all the issues across Florida last year during produce season?
It's weather related, right? So Hurricane Ian, atmospheric rivers in California, growers are starting to get the volumes moving, and truckloads are starting to move. And for the first time first time this year, the USDA reported a shortage of trucks in all 6 produce regions in California. Normally, they always report a slight surplus or inadequate supply. This was the first week that California reported a shortage of trucks. So we spoke 10 minutes ago about the West Coast not being a good place for volumes, and a lot of carriers have moved their assets to other areas like the East Coast because of the shift in imports partly. So what's happening is capacity is tightening now as produce volumes ramp up, which is a great sign, because the bellwether for produce lifting our spot market is produce season, and in particular California. So 1 week doesn't make a long-term trend. I acknowledge that, but the signs are there that the market is starting to show signs of seasonality. Florida is just absolutely on fire right now. Rates are up 20 cents a mile last week, averaging $2.20. It wasn't that long ago they were $1 a mile lower. But it's pretty short-lived. You've got watermelon season peaking, flowers coming up to this Sunday. Once you get past May, the Florida market cools off pretty rapidly as it gets very hot. Obviously, they don't grow a lot of produce after May. But all of our other markets will start to pick up. So some good news. So if you think about, will the rising tide lift all boats? This is not a usual economy. I don't know that, the entire freight market's going to lift, but parts of it will. So flatbed in Texas, produce coming out of California.
If that market lifts. I want some nice, fresh, tasty produce this year, because I feel like it's been almost 3 years since we've had like real good produce, up here anyways. I don't know about you guys, but I know like tomatoes, I haven't had a really good tasting tomato in a really long time.
Right.
Just the flavor when you get a bacon lettuce tomato sandwich and you just load the tomatoes and lettuce. And then we've had lettuce shortages. I haven't been able to find a zucchini in like 2 weeks.
Right.
Just can't find them. Like I'm looking for, for our shelves to be stocked again with good produce that didn't kind of ripen in a dark container on the sea somewhere. You know what I mean? Because it's I don't know. For me, it's that produce is awesome. Right. Like it makes the summer, like nice cold mango sitting outside in a hot, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we haven't had it in a couple of years.
Maybe it's
like we haven't had it.
Maybe you need to change your what you wash it down with.
Oh yeah, that could be. And then not also that. Would you think also, Dean, going back to California, that because of the issues last year, because of the drought that California's been going through for the last couple of years, do you think some people that would normally like be dedicated to California kind of retooled just so they might not have got caught?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of carriers. I remember when I worked at FreightWaves a few years ago, we kind of wrote an article that was headline, "Go West, young man," to use a phrase from maybe a movie, I can't remember, because back in 2018, it was everybody pulling volume in to avoid the increase in tariffs on Chinese imports, and it was just a great place to put your assets because of the volume. At the in the early part of the pandemic, when we were bringing in all of these imports from Asia, it was a great place to be because all of the imports were coming in from Asia, landing in Los Angeles and Long Beach. It's kind of evaporated. So a lot of the people that would look to run into the West Coast are not doing that. On top of that, you've also got a lot of regulations that are keeping carriers away. There's a lot of carriers that just won't run to California because of the environmental laws, the idling laws. There's just a lot of people that have said, you know what, we're not interested in running to California. So I think there's that on top of the decline in volume. So it's gone from a great place to be to run your assets with pretty good long haul volume to not a good place to be for carriers. So you've got this big chasm, I think, between, if I could draw a line down the Rockies and the Mississippi, there's a lot of carriers that, you want to be very careful if you're going to run into that headwind across the I-40 or I-80 to get to the West Coast, because the volumes and the rates aren't there to offset those costs. So,
So what do you see as the next big push? Like Ryan was saying, if you're talking flowers and you're talking, this kind of stuff, you should have been talking to your customers in this November, December about when they're pushing flowers and all this kind of stuff. And so, you got road salt that's going to be coming up pretty soon. By September, October, road salt's in every single place it should be. What are some of the markets that you're looking at now that we can maybe share with salespeople to say, okay, start having conversations with prospects in these markets because this is the next one to kind of pop?
Right. It's a really good question. I don't know that I'd give it much thought beyond produce season, because produce season's the one that will drive us. I mean, Jeff, you were on our show a few weeks ago, and I think you're right. If we don't see this meaningful increase in volume sustained through Labor Day, then we have a very different discussion on our hands, Dan. But I'm looking again. This is flatbed. So let's talk about flatbed, right? I'd be looking in commercial construction. If it's refrigerated, I'd be looking into the produce season across different regions. Dry van, a little bit difficult. I'm not sure how I'd take that one, because there's nothing sort of emerging that's sort of going to move the needle unless import volumes are sustained. Now, rates are coming down on intermodal. Intermodals owns the long haul space, right? So the gap between, there's not many lanes where truckload's better than intermodal. They're fighting for revenue on their trains because they've got so many empties. I won't name the company, but when I was at the BNSF ramp, I counted just over 1,200 empty 53-foot boxes stacked outside in a area that I knew there were none last year. So, 1,200 53s, a lot of them were pretty new because they were purchased, new in the last couple of years. So I think there's a lot of excess capacity in the intermodal network. They are fighting for a lot of that long haul revenue. I just don't see imports being the catalyst for some sort of movement in dry van, Dan, because there's so much intermodal capacity in the market. Long haul, they really own that 1,200 mile space. So, produce season is going to be a big one. There's not a lot of. I mean, Jason Miller and Jeff, you mentioned this last week. There isn't the catalyst, the market shock that would normally lift up prior markets. 2015, 2012, 2016, 2019 freight recessions. There was always something that lifted the market out. It's not on the horizon because our manufacturing numbers are tepid. Even though construction volumes or spending is up, it's not enough to lift the entire market because housing's down. Mm-hmm. That's playing out across a number of markets, and that's sort of how we see it. I don't know that once we get beyond produce season, Dan, that what things are going to look like. I just don't have the visibility into the market.
Well, I'll tell you something, Dean, and I'll share the graph with Ryan for next week. But trend economics, this graph that just showed doom and gloom through April of 2024, completely flat. And they're looking at all segments. And that's not a good indicator. I don't like to just take one resource and say, that's what's going to happen. I kind of look at everything, which I tell everybody to do so they can get their own personal perspective of what's happening. But when you start seeing everybody following in line, not saying the exact same thing, but saying almost the same thing, it kind of tells you a very big story. And I hope that what they're saying out there isn't true, because it just shows a complete flat peak season, and what's going to happen. There will be a bloodbath after Memorial Day. I read that too. Several articles that basically said that carriers out there, it's just not going to be sustainable for them to continue doing business, not making the kind of money per mile to stay afloat. I don't know. It's a difficult call right now. It really is.
Well, carriers are still exiting the market, in the interstate long haul sector. The sentiment's still very negative, but you're still talking about very small numbers. The capacity migration is the thing you've got to watch, because contract rates are still sitting about $2.20 a mile, I think it is, on when you take out the fuel surcharge. So there's still a very healthy contract freight market. Contract freight markets are still coming down, but they're still, from a carrier's perspective, if I look at it this morning, $2.18 they are in May. So they're down about 30 cents year over year on the contract van side. That's still pretty healthy rates for a carrier. Like not the sort of rates you would have expected a year ago, but they're rates you can make money at if you're a carrier.
Yeah, and the rates during COVID and all that kind of stuff, and even a year ago, I mean, we all knew that was an anomaly. We all knew, guys, bank, because it's not going to last forever. It's it sounds like the same conversation from 2018 to 19, right? And then I remember we were saying could never use 2018 as a benchmark. Now we're using 2018 as a benchmark. I think it's the same thing over and over and over and over again, just with a different storyline or a different kind of baseline that's having the impact, right? So last year's produce season, it was the drought, and then this year it's okay, it's coming back, but it's nothing like what it was the year before. Now maybe that drought actually killed off a lot of things that took almost 2 years to mature. I mean, I'm not a horticulturist by any means, but I do know if you look at like bamboo, it's 9 months and nothing happens, and all of a sudden it sprouts. But in that 9 months, if you don't water it, 9 months later, it doesn't happen. So you're anticipating something for so long, and then it never really happens, right? Which is why maybe next week, Dean, if we can we look at kind of what the next, and operating obviously on a positive outlook, okay, so the next big thing is this, then the next big thing, because I know we got coming up to Super Bowl, we got the avocados that would come up to Super Bowl normally, and there was all these different things for different kind of areas. Summertime, so all the furniture, all the lawn chairs, all that furniture is pretty much done in the warehouses now, right? So are people going to be looking at snow shovels, snow blowers, ATVs, tractors, like this kind of stuff? Because I think there's a whole bunch of markets out there that people aren't necessarily being strategic thinkers about going after, And not to mention, I see a lot of the doom and gloom in the spot market. It's the ones that don't they go after A, B, C customer, and it's like they get a load here, a load here, a load here. And there's no real viability to create the relationships with carriers. So they're on LoadLink or they're on ITS or they're on whatever. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, you got a truck? Okay, yeah. Well, the $300. Oh, well, then somebody calls, says, I'll do it for $250. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, take it. And that's what's driving the rates down. But what if we could give that to the audience? You think you can pull that together?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can. I was just thinking about, you're talking about peak season. That's why, imports are up 16% this month. And normally one of the things that would drive the market is the peak in shipping, that sort of, that September, October, November period that starts the peak season. What we don't know, and because we've still got a hangover of inventories, what we don't know, if I was to say the big thing to watch for is peak shipping season, we don't know if this is a repeat of the last 2 years where peak season occurred in June and July. Because everyone pulled forward their inventories, right? Because remember last year it was like June, and then things kind of went flat. And because people were worried about having their containers tied up at anchor off Los Angeles. So that's the danger, Dan, in going down that path, because there's still so much. I was thinking about it this morning. There's some good news and there's some bad news, but there's no momentum. There's still no momentum in the market that you can say this is where we're headed, because we're week to week. It's like a game time decision. We are week to week, every week, because things are changing. Now, the last couple of weeks we've seen things improve. Diesel dropped 10 cents this week. It's under $4 a gallon. For every 10 cents diesel drops, operating costs a penny per mile for a carrier, a long haul carrier. So they're coming down, but even though diesel dropped 10 cents, rates kept sliding, which meant their margins are still around 2 to 3 cents above break even per mile. We're still 5 cents above 2019, but we are heading perilously close to 2019 levels, which is when you start to see, if that's sustained, that's when you start to see carriers exit the industry. And again, we've talked about 2019 as being a year that this year is shaping up a lot like, from a demand perspective. From a carrier perspective, remember, we talked about it before, auction inventory spiked at about 1,200 trucks in June of 2019. It was also the quarter we had record levels of bankruptcies. Last month, the number of trucks at auction was 800. So 1,200 in June. So what that tells you is a lot of excess capacity is being sold off at auction, in particular the high mileage trucks that were, just purchased in the last, because people just wanted to get a truck, regardless of whether it was out of warranty or not. So a lot of that inventory is being cycled off. There's like probably a dozen different things that are going on right now that could turn the market. If rates drop any further, then yes, you will see capacity exit the industry and the market will turn sooner.
Which I think is what we need, in all honesty. I think we need that. I mean, we do it to ourselves all the time. And when I say we, just in industry as a whole, we do it to ourselves all the time.
Well, you asked me a year ago, do you think we'll see a repeat of 2018, 2019? I thought, no, I don't think so. Of course, I was wrong. Well, as it turns out, my timing was off because it took a lot longer, because carriers were coming off a much more profitable period, and it took a lot longer for them. So this year it's been really different. There's been a lot of the carriers that have been done very well during the pandemic period, that already owned their own equipment, have banked away a lot of cash. They sold down a lot of their debt or paid off a lot of their debt. They own their own assets. They can run for 30 to 40 cents a mile less than a brand new carrier can, probably more. And
if there's 2 or 3 in the industry, their insurance has gone down by now because they're not in that critical zone either.
So, I pay 10 grand a year for my truck. I've got no accidents in 5 years. I only pay 10 grand a year truck insurance. That's middle of the road, right? For someone with a good claims experience and good history. But you could easily be paying as a new entrant 25 to 30 grand per powered unit during the past market cycle. That's a lot of money to try. You can't get the rate per mile. That's why a lot of guys that are on the marginal carriers that had high operating costs to start with, when rates dropped, The margins just aren't there for them to be profitable. And Dan, it was the same as 2018. I remember saying in 2018, gosh, you'd have to be, pretty, not very clever at running trucks to not make money. Because it was easy to make money in 2018. It was even far easier during the pandemic to make money. You'd have to be crazy not to be making money during that period. And of course, if you're not disciplined and you don't understand the market, whether you're a broker, a logistics provider, or a carrier or a shipper, if you don't understand the market and the operating costs, it's very hard to survive the ups and the downs.
Well, Ryan and I have had this conversation numerous times where, as a broker during the pandemic, like if you weren't raking it in, there was a problem. Right. And now it's not as easy. And now is when skill and true value comes to the table. Now is when it says, okay, well, what do you do differently than somebody else to help me? And, you talked about furniture being up 17%. What was it? What was furniture up imports in April?
Well, 16% overall. I don't have the furniture number. If you could give me a second, I can tell you.
Because furniture was the largest one, right? You said
it's the largest one. Yeah. Furniture accounts for 13%, up 30% month over month.
Yeah. So that I look at that and I immediately say that's a very positive sign, because manufacturers are anticipating people buying. And people starting to replace that furniture, outdoor furniture, or whatever it may be. And like Ryan said at the beginning, you're growing up when you got to buy outdoor furniture, because Ryan, you're getting your backyard done. So you're just going to start looking at outdoor furniture and outdoor patio sets and stuff. And this is huge. And they're still coming in. Like Canadian Tire is getting shipments of it consistently. So that's still there. If you have furniture.
But they're the big gorilla, though, when you think about it, too, right? You look at Canadian Tire being the
Home
biggest
Depot.
thing, and Home Depot, those being the big gorillas. And just a tip for anybody, like we're talking about, COVID was easy to make money. I told that to everybody but for now, to kind of differentiate yourself, I think for me, I'm going a lot local. Like I'm talking to my local mom and pop places. What are they doing for their shipments? Because Dan could attest to this. We had a guest on yesterday and we're talking backstage, and she said that, Amazon is kicking out smaller to mid-size companies out of their warehouse. They threw them a ridiculous bill. We won't get into it, but they threw them a ridiculous bill for 5 to 6 pallets a month just at their warehouse. And you think Amazon, big players, right? So I think where you differentiate yourself, like we talk to a bunch of shipping managers on LinkedIn, or when we have phone calls, some of them are being cost, they're being cost effective. A lot of them are going to new jobs and starting new places. There was an article that I shared with a couple of friends where, quiet quitting is happening on the shipper side, right? So you're seeing a lot of logistics managers kind of leaving, or they're just kind of they kind of explained it that, that shipping manager would normally be at the front of the classroom, putting up their hand, doing all the notes, participating. They've now moved to the back of the class, and everybody knows everyone's in school, right? So the back of the class, the kind of stuff kind of happens. So you've got to have that question, that conversation with everybody. Gone are the days are post it and pray. But gone are the days, I feel like, and this is just me personally talking about this, I don't know what your guys' opinion would be, but, if carriers are not going to be willing to work with you, because I see on my end, we can talk about the rates being this, but they're not passing on the savings. Right, they're gonna want to, obviously, for their own viability, right? So they're gonna try to rake it to the coals, and it has to be a balance, right? Because we're always gonna have that broker carrier thing. But I just think it's really important when you look at those main seasonality, like Dan was talking about. But you look at construction, we all know houses. I don't know about the States, but houses is going up here. I'm literally looking at probably a 20 million project right across my thing of townhomes coming up, and they're not building far and wide; they're building short and high, right? So
yeah, we got
another thing about Amazon. Amazon was hiring local florists, delivery service, to do their super regional deliveries. I just read that this morning.
Well, we don't have any actual Amazon delivery drivers. They're all outsourced. They're getting to a point where it's kind of, and let's talk about that a little bit, where we're seeing freight brokerages, they're getting rid of that salary model, that base plus commission, and going towards that agent model. Right. And you look at the pros and cons, right, Jeff? If you have somebody who's not contracted, they don't get an employee from Amazon. What is their incentive to show up every single day? And we see that on the freight brokerage side as well. What is the incentive for an agent to sell and be loyal, not necessarily be loyal, but, give that attention to a company?
I've had Amazon packages delivered to some guy that pulls up in his car, opens his trunk, like not even a big van, just opens his trunk and
Well,
drops
you rent a U-Haul
packages off.
van. I mean, Dan, you rent a U-Haul, and you can make a viable business out of this.
Yeah.
You get you buy a safety vest off of Amazon. Well, not off of Amazon because you gotta wait for it, but you go to Walmart and buy it for $15, and you have a business. You get a U-Haul
Slap
truck.
a magnetic placard on the side of your truck. You're ready to hit the road.
Crooked. You got to have it crooked. You can't have your sign on the side of your truck straight. It's got to be. That's like tell me you're not new to the trucking industry without telling me you're not new to the trucking industry. Just put your sign on a little bit crooked. Come on, guys. Like, who does that?
They're switching MC numbers on that.
Oh yeah.
That's what they're doing.
MC
Hey,
number
They're all
1.
magnetic things from the dollar store. Click, 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 click. I did that wrong. My dyslexia.
But let's talk a little bit about that because we're talking about imports and things like that. But you look at the gig economy, and I'd love to have a conversation one day about the gig economy. People kind of going on and doing like their own things and starting new businesses, right? Because if you're hiring like Jeff was saying, like they're hiring florists to do like their deliveries. Well, that's another gig economy. You look at Uber, you look at Instacart. I know, Dan, you were a big Instacart person during the pandemic, and you have those things for convenience, right? So when you're talking to your customers and relating this back to freight, you kind of want to be that easy button. You kind of want to be the Uber or the Airbnb for your customer, for the fact that they've got it and you can take care of it from that end.
Right.
Yeah, and it's I believe that's where everything's turning. I mean, I've seen so many shops in my town go out of business because people just aren't coming out anymore. Like our town used to be like, we were in a small town, right? Which is kind of like one of those, kind of like old school towns where you walk up and down, you grab an ice cream, you walk up and down Main Street, you go to the bakery, and there's very few people now. And it's like everybody wants that convenience of being at home and saying, well, I have to order these things and then let's go out here and do this and that. By the time you get back, it's here.
Yeah, something, we have a huge push in my town, support local businesses for that primary reason. They want people to get out of their homes and start shopping locally. But we got so used to, especially during the pandemic, to sit on our butts behind a monitor and start ordering stuff online through Amazon and everybody else because it was that convenience. You didn't have
to be fair, the government made it that way, right? Like, I don't know about you guys in the States, but in Canada, in Canada, they fearmongered, right? They basically said, like in Quebec, like you would actually get charged for walking your dogs, like that was what it is. But one point I kind of want to leave here, Dean, I don't know if you know this, but like, we're seeing the cost of living kind of going crazy here. But in Canada, starting July, I don't know if you know about this, Dan, but our government is actually giving money back to our citizens for a grocery incentive. So there is going to be a grocery rebate. So every family should be getting like $200 to $400, depending on what your family type is. So we can see an influx of spending again, whether it be at the grocery, whether at the pumps and things like that. So I'm intrigued to kind of see what that's going to look like. So I think Trudeau's government says it's going to be about $2.5 billion back into the economy, back into citizens' hands.
Well, you know what? I think they should, because I'm sorry, but I mean, I didn't. Christine did all the grocery shopping while I was sick, and normally I would do it, and I'm back to doing it now, and I'm disgusted at the prices of some stuff. Like, it is cheaper to eat like garbage and about a third of the price to eat like garbage and to try and feed your family healthy food. Like, it's crazy the prices. And you know what? Sometimes I sit there and I say, I wonder how many people can't actually eat. Like, can't afford, anything other than Hamburger Helper or stuff like that. Like, there's people out there. And then, you look at everything else with it. If you have medical concerns and prescriptions and insulin and all these other things that we face, real world problems. And then it's kind of like, well, I need food as well. And it's crazy. But then you see things like Skip the dishes and all this. They're going crazy because now I can sit at home and I can just go and I get any food I want instead of cooking it.
Well, you relate that back to logistics, right, Dan? So you're talking about, okay, you just mentioned like insulin and you mentioned consumables. If a new sales rep is coming into this industry, like research those places.
Yeah.
Those are things that people, there's like when I do my grocery list, I already know what I'm going to buy. And I know Dean's wife has a catering business and she probably goes in with her strict list, whether to be the farmers markets or to the local grocery or the business centers. And you have your non-negotiables. Like for me, it's always going to be
Right.
lettuce, it's going to be chicken breast. Those are the staples like I can't live without of. So if
Yep.
you're a new sales rep, look at those things. Look at your actual bill, and then actually kind of prospect out of there. I think it's just a great idea because you're a raving fan because you have it every week, and it's something that you treat yourself to. Like if it's a random gelato or something like that, you maybe not prospect that, but you can talk on the things that are moving in and out. And the one thing Dan mentioned was like, he can't wait for his stocks to be shelved. Dan is in a small town. I'm in a big town. I haven't seen any empty shelves. So that means that there is something that I've actually had Walmart's guys that they've actually added a shelf to their actual shelves. So now I got to get somebody who's like a basketball player to grab the cereal for me off the top. Maybe I'll get Jeff from there. But I just think as there's so many opportunities for sales reps, I know people are talking volumes are down, but that's where you really got to be creative. You really, as Jeff kind of says, work your customers from the inside out and just make it happen.
Yeah, we're still consuming. We're still consuming. So for any rep that's having a real issue, just look at what you consume. Walk through the mall and look at what people have in their bags. Look at what stores they're going to. Take a walk through whatever shopping center, grocery store, whatever. And all of those consumables are, staples. What are people buying from Staples? Right? There's a lot of work that goes into a box of paper.
Oh,
Hey,
Beauty.
Dan, I've been thinking about your question. I just pulled up some numbers to answer your question about what's the next big thing, right? Because normally fall is a pretty big deal in trucking. Right? General rule of thumb is if it's not in warehouses by October, it won't be on the shelves for Christmas. That's the normal trend. Yep. Peak in railroad shipping on the intermodal side is normally, I think, September, October period. Trucking happens a little bit later because it's a bit quicker time cycle. But I went back and just pulled some data. So if you look at the last few freight recessions, 2012, 2015, 2018, right? They entered negative territory so 2012, they entered negative, 2015, they went negative, 2018, they went into negative territory, right? They were the recessions of 13, 16, and 19. When you look at the amount of time they spent in the red, as in rates were lower year over year, 17 months in 2013, 20 months in 2016, 17 months in 2019. We're at 13 months right now. So our market went negative year over year last April. So you could deduce from that we've probably got another 4 to 6 months of pretty mediocre conditions before this market turns, which will be around when retail shipping peak season starts. So that's the bleak outlook. Heck, that's like if you're going to have a pretty flat market through summer, I couldn't drink enough beer to get myself past that. Like, I don't know, it's going to be pretty bad.
Brutal.
I'd spill most of it, I'm sure.
I was going to say, you should prospect beer then, I should definitely add that on.
There you go. There you go.
We're going to need it to get
alcohol and cannabis consumption are up huge from COVID. So there you go. There's 2 industries that will feed your family plus. Especially if you're eating edibles, you're going to want to be fed. So yeah.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. If you're looking to move product, hit up your beer distributors.
Well, so it's good. Like it's like I said, I'm a big fan of that, guys. Like in honestly speaking, like I love to talk to customers that I use. Like my dog food is a big one of them. Like they do raw dog food, and I do most of their shipping, and it's because I can actually attest to it. Like I love sending pictures, and it makes the relationship better with your shipper when you can relate with them, right? I always look for that when I talk to logistics managers. Where's our congruency? Because it's not just going to be business. Exactly. It's going to be like Dean. Like I know you're a wrestling guy. I've got customers who are wrestling fans, so it'll be like, hey, did you watch wrestling last night? Did you whatever? But you kind of get that congruency so that when things like this happen, those ebbs and flows of logistics happen, you're protected. You're continuing to do your work as a consultant, as a service provider, rather just being, hey, this is just a guy we add to a list that, hey, he's a cool guy. He's a really nice guy and he likes wrestling and stuff like that. But he's just a broker number 25 on a list of 100.
And not to mention, Ryan, you just said something very profound there, right? You're in the dog food industry. How many of us, our dogs eat better than we do,
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
right? Like
We eat the same. Mine
dog
eat the same.
toys. Dog,
You guys share the food?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
Definitely.
so dog toys, like our pets are spoiled,
Yep.
and being in that industry, pretty much, I wouldn't say it's recession proof, but it's pretty damn close. Pretty damn
I
close,
would
because
no, I
no
would
matter
say it's
what,
recession proof. I would, man. I really would
Yeah.
say it's recession proof because there was a comment made at our local temple, our church, and it was like we have a ceremony where we have to have like 9 girls and then they get like money and treats and all that stuff. It's a prayer that we do. And our priest made a comment, was like, yeah, we don't have enough girls because everyone decides that they want to get dogs as grandchildren now. You know, they want to go and get more dogs and things like that. And I think when you look at something like that, right, you can talk about consumables for animals, you talk about consumables for yourself. Dean's talking about construction and furniture. People are going to be moving into new houses. People look at what people are doing. Talk within your circle, because anytime I go golfing or talk to people within my circle, I can talk to Jeff, and Jeff will be like, "Hey, I just took a drive to this forest that we went, and I purchased this." It's like, okay, well, things are doing. We're not at a standstill. We're not in COVID anymore.
Yep.
We're not stuck in the home. There is options.
100%.
There we go. So
Beauty.
definitely. Let's wrap this bad boy up. So, Dean, what do you got? Anything cool coming up in the next 2 weeks? Let's hear about that. IQ Live. Let's hear it. Plug it up all the way, my man.
Yeah, Great West Casualty Conference, my last one of 5. 5 of 5 happens in Indianapolis this Friday morning. It's been an amazing series. We have probably 200 to 300 client, truckload carriers at each event. About 10% are DAT customers. So we talk a lot about, how to use data to predict accidents in the freight market. So it's been good to get back out and talk to carriers. There's no question they're struggling when you talk to a lot of the larger fleets that have over 100 trucks. They're chasing whatever they can. They're doing more spot market loads than they would normally. So it's been very illuminating to be out there. We've got our show up, of course, next Tuesday, on Tuesday, 10 a.m. Next week's guest, heck, I should know this off the top of my head. I don't have it with me. Dang it. I think we've got a special guest on next week. It is going to be, if you give me 1 second as I pad here, Ibrahim Bayan, former chief economist? Yeah, I think chief economist. Ibrahim Bayan was the chief economist at Freightwaves when I was there. Incredibly clever economist when it comes to the trucking industry. He'll be on. Jeff, you'll like this show. He works for a company called Nuveen. They are a commercial warehouse research firm. And we had him on a few months ago talking about the growth in the warehouse market. So I intend to grill him about what we've been seeing in Fort Worth in particular, but talk more broadly about the industry. So he's on 10 a.m. next Tuesday. Thank you for allowing me to another shameless plug.
No, it's not a shameless plug at all. No,
not a shameless plug.
You
It's a
spend that
plug.
time with us. It's a plug, my man. It's a plug. You've earned it, my man, with all this time. And Cowboy, I know you've got a busy. You got something coming up. What's going on in your life, my man?
Yeah, just for your edification, in the U.S., the pet supply industry is a $17.2 billion industry. Huge.
Make it happen, man. Make it happen, man. Make it happen, man. It's such a big industry.
Give me 6% of that.
Give me 2.
Yeah, give me 1, man. You're being a little bit greedy out here, but and that's the one thing, right? People will not compromise, and it's one of the coolest things to kind of see. So, Cowboy, what do you got coming up? I know you got a big journey starting up next week.
Yeah. Starting on the 15th, I'm launching my new podcast. It's called Life Lessons and Logistics: The Storytelling Chronicles. I'm looking forward to it. I've been working on it for a while now. Be at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time on Monday.
Can you give us for everyone who's watching, a little sneak peek? Who's your first guest, or you just want to hold that off, make that a surprise?
Yeah, I'm going to hold that off. Yeah.
All right. I see how it is.
Yep.
I see how it is.
Yeah,
I see how it is.
Okay.
It's all good there. So, Dano, 3 takeaways from today, and take us home, my friend.
3 takeaways from today: be ahead of the freight cycles. Really start to be strategic about what businesses you go after, and be yourself when you're on the phone call. I think, Ryan, you said it perfectly. Like, start with stuff that you like. Start with stuff that you can really enjoy and have a great conversation about, for sure. And then don't check out our new website, saleschatterlive.com. Actually, Ryan, we need to put your email template up there today. We forgot to do that last week.
No, we'll definitely make that happen. So I want to thank everybody who's been with us on the journey so far. We'll see you guys tomorrow for honestly one of my favorite days. Other than Data Day, we're getting into Personal Development Thursdays where we go through 2 clips and we kind of give our feedback. So we'll see you guys tomorrow live at 11 a.m. Have an amazing day. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Cowboy. And we'll see you guys next week.
Have a great day, guys.